The floor to Mrs. Nicole Farnsworth, Program Manager and Lead Researcher at Kosovo Women's Network. Please.
Okay. Dear members of the European Parliament and respective delegations, on behalf of my fellow women's rights activists from 6 countries and from the Kvinitolfina Foundation, we thank you for the opportunity to present our views to you today. Violence against women is a problem everywhere in the world, as has been noted here today already. However, we face additional problems. Politicians, both local and foreign, tend to prioritize the so-called high-level political issues over the issues that affect people's everyday lives, such as sex-selective abortion of girls, domestic violence, and sexual harassment. Activists have long argued that peace is not merely the absence of war. How useful are borders or an army if you do not have security within your own home, your own school, your own workplace, your own street? Or if you still suffer the effects of sexual violence that was perpetrated against you during the war, because no apologies have been made publicly, no reparations have been offered, and no justice has been served. Today, we want to underline an important role that all of us here can have in ensuring that governments make violence against women a political priority. Since there are many issues to address, I will just focus primarily on 2, especially from all of my colleagues in other countries as well. The first is the weak institutional response to violence against women. Rule of law and justice systems do not function properly in addressing violence. Police regularly ignore sexual harassment and sexual assault. For example, in Kosovo, police have not registered a single rape case in 3 years. Only 4 sexual assault cases have been registered. This is not because it's not happening. It's because it's not being reported or it's not being documented by the police. We know this personally because we have followed cases to the police and watched the process. We have seen young women face firsthand the discrimination by the police and by other institutions. Research shows that blaming the victim remains very common. But a crime is a crime, and it must be prosecuted ex officio. It is never the victim's fault. When cases do go to court, low to no sentencing offers a contradictory message that violence can be tolerated. The lack of response and financial dependency on perpetrators has dissuaded women from reporting violence, creating an enabling environment for such violence to continue. Several women have died. Recently in Kosovo, Zenepe Berisha was stabbed 20 times by her husband, resulting in her death. Her daughter tried to intervene to stop the violence and was stabbed as well. She died, Zenepe Berisha. She had reported to police 16 times the violence that was happening within her home, but nothing was done. 16 times. Recently, her case went to court, and there was a ruling. Her husband was given a minimum sentence, and activists immediately took to the streets, and they led a protest for the justice for Zenepe, joined by women and men citizens. The Kosovo Women's Network has since contracted a private lawyer to assist her family in reopening this case, and our lawyer has found numerous irregularities with the prosecution's case. Despite a legal framework that is very strong in Kosovo, domestic violence still somehow becomes lost between the police, the prosecution, and the courts. The absence of an interinstitutional case management system has contributed to a lack of transparency and accountability regarding who is losing the cases and who is not following through. But ironically, foreign donors have given thousands of euros to address this very problem. Yet institutions have squabbled for years over who will have the power to administer the case management system. And so still today we do not have such a system. This is unacceptable. We need such a system so that we can hold accountable the police, the prosecutors, the judges that are failing to pass the cases on and to process them. Throughout the region, states have not institutionalized support for persons who have suffered violence, including SOS hotlines, which are not existing in most countries, sustainable financing for shelters, and adequate counseling and rehabilitative services. Compensation for victims of crimes is still insufficient or absolutely non-existent. Making perpetrators pay financially for the crimes that they commit as part of justice can curb violence, we believe, and contribute funding to compensation funds, providing women with an economic means to continue on their lives after violence has happened. Some of our recommendations include that the EU can continue to treat violence against women as a human rights and a rule of law issue within the political criteria. Country reports should regularly address institutional response to violence against women. The EU should strongly encourage governments to make improving response to violence against women a priority. The EU can pressure governments to allocate sufficient funding for implementing existing laws and policies against violence against women, for improving justice, for ensuring compensation funds are working, and for shelters, including those run by women's organizations who are experts in this issue. Rehabilitative services are also very important if we want women to come forward and to report violence. Towards realizing the aims of the Gender Action Plan, the EU should continue supporting local women's rights groups who have a direct connection with the community. This includes by funding research, advocacy, education, and training on violence against women. Women's organizations play an essential role in sustaining advocacy over time. When larger organizations and donors come and go, we are the ones on the ground who continue to push, even without funding, for the implementation of existing laws and to monitor and to support victims of crimes. It is essential that we receive support, and we need the EU's continued support, both politically and financially, so that we can continue our work. Also, in accordance with the Gender Action Plan, it is very important for EU officials to raise regularly issues about women's rights when they meet with high-level politicians, speak to parliaments, or speak in public. This can provide very important political support for the work of women's organizations and for addressing violence. The second issue I want to talk about today is improved justice and reparations for sexual violence perpetrated against women during war. As we know, sexual violence was used as a weapon of war against women. Considering that thousands of women were raped, there have been very few trials or convictions, partially due to the difficulties in extraditing alleged perpetrators. Some states have reparations, but most do not. As per United Nations Security Council Resolution 1325, there should be justice and reparations for the crimes committed. This is crucial for lasting peace in the region. The EU can pressure states to acknowledge publicly the crimes that were committed, to reach agreements for the extradition of alleged perpetrators, and to pay reparations to the victims. There can be no lasting peace in the region until there is security for all, women and men, in both public and private spheres. We thank you for your continued support.
Thank you very much, Ms. Farnsworth. Thank you.